Thanks. All right, well, good morning. Welcome to 1 Million Cups. If you want to tell the people back there, that'd be great. Thanks. Yes, again. All right, so we are 1 Million Cups, which is got a mission. All right.
Here.
Just
We've got a
I'm gonna mess up your slides while I let people in. While you're
oh,
doing
that's
this,
fine.
okay?
Thank you. So I go ahead and you can check in online. You become a member. We don't spam you. It's wonderful. We just send things when it's kind of important. So like 3 or 5 times a year.
Actually, that's not true.
What? It's changed?
potentially weekly.
Yes, weekly.
Who's doing this? Eric? Okay, Eric has changed up the mode without telling me. That's okay. I don't need to
Without
know.
telling you, or maybe someone wasn't listening or getting the emails and recognizing.
I'm going to see it from my point of view.
Okay.
Off the
All right, so updates weekly, but that's about what you get there. So that we can get an update of who's coming, who's presenting. And for people in campus, we've got little QR codes, I think. Do we see those around? Anyone hold it up if you can see it?
Oh, what?
QR codes. QR
Just
code.
on the one just before.
Yes, it's coming. Thank you, Lisa. So our mission here is we really want to make it easier for people to get into business and make it happen, no matter what barriers you're usually thinking about. And it might just be a mental one. And the cool thing is when I came to 1 Million Cups a long time ago, I saw people messing up on stuff and I said, I can do that. So you can mess up too. And it's really fun, okay? And you can start business and you can bring world peace and it's wonderful, okay? So, oh, I still got the power here. So national and local missions. So it's a national group, kind of, that we're all over the country. And then we're focused on the local businesses and to really give them, you know, the kind of, it says uniqueness here. So highlighting the uniqueness of folks in our area and what we're up to around in the area. But with us going, you know, Zoom and hybrid, we actually have the potential of reaching out to other places too, especially if they have something unique that they're trying to offer. And we want to encourage that. And there's something I did wrong. Oh, I pushed the, there we go. There we are. Figuring it out. In New Mexico, we are the only ones. We're also hidden by our own words, which is okay, because we really like to talk a lot. And the rest of the places here, these are other 1 Million Cups happening. And so if they're in our zone, you could choose to go there instead of here, which isn't the best. But if it's outside of our zone, you can catch them before or after this session online. So that's pretty exciting. And the key pillars we have are presentations, not pitches. So some people who come here know about pitches. I didn't know about pitches when I came here. But apparently that's a thing where you talk about how wonderful you are and how other people want to give you money, right? Or you want people to come in and just give you a bunch of clients. That's not what we're into. Here we want to talk about the different things that we're working on in our company that are like pivoting or starting new or whatever it is, so that we can really have people give us feedback and have a good conversation. And then authentic connections, not networking. So we want to be talking to each other, not just passing around business cards. For the community, by the community. So everybody here is, well, you're part of the community. And we're for the community, trying to build up this conversation. And we're really inclusive. So if you don't like other people, we don't like you. That's
really.
1 Million Cups mission. So this is our local one for Albuquerque. We're kind of focusing on being vulnerable because again, back to the sharing the problems we're having, we really identify with others if we can figure out how we can help each other. And the amount that we don't know is always way more than what we do know, even in the thing that we're really good at. And especially on the things that we don't think we're very good at. So we can work together and make it work. Apply to present. So in presenting, what you do is you apply online, you become a member of 1 Million Cups, and then you push the apply button, and then it gives you a bunch of questions that you kind of answer. And if they feel difficult, you can ask Paul, he loves to answer questions. And he'll tell you like, that doesn't really matter or put something else there. Anyway, when you fill out the form, then we get in contact with you if we haven't already been in contact with you. And we kind of coach you through the process of how to present here. And we really focus on your journey and what your challenges are, and of course, how you make money. And so if you don't feel like you're ready for it, this is the best time for you to present, because we really want to help you make the changes and things you want to have happen that haven't happened. And then you get to come back, like some of our presenters have done. They are invited to come back every 6 months at least. Now it's automated. They say, hey, how would you come back and present again? So when Jay presents today, she's going to come back in 6 months and tell us all the cool things that have happened. And it's going to be totally exciting. And Danielle is going to come back and present her stuff, and Jason and Jessica. Isn't this great? There's great people who can come here. It's so delightful. Anyway, so this is our team. And the top 2 people don't matter. And there's Lisa, Eric, there's Kikoa, and Sonia. And we all have our own little businesses or working for some really cool entrepreneurs here. And we appreciate the team we've got. And if you want to join the team, you could probably do that. And okay, so these people are sponsoring us. Fat Pipe has given us a location here since the beginning. And Jason Photography is making us look real slick online. You can always catch his stuff on LinkedIn and see our beautiful faces again. More Than Organized is giving us creamer to keep it smooth back there. And then we've got the coffee is being sponsored by Foundation for Sustainable Living. And we've got Noventum Coffee, Noventum Custom Softwares Development, and he brings the donuts. And then when she's here, we've got and Vibe, and they bring fruits and stuff if they're here. Thanks for joining us.
Great.
Well, thank you, Adam. It's great to know that everything is welcome here except misanthropy. So I try to keep mine in check. I'm a little crusty every once in a while. So it's we see a range of companies here at Million Cups, from people who are just starting out to people that are farther along than quite the average in the room. And today's one of those days. So we're going to have Jay talk to us about Memory Well PlanAllies, and she'll tell us how things are going.
Thank you. All right, Adam, can you take over the waiting room so I cannot screw up Jay's 40? I guess I'll leave captions at the bottom for now. Hopefully that I won't have to move them. All right, go for it.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here, and it's nice to meet you all. So my name is, let me just make sure I can do this. Does that work? Okay. My name is Jay Newton Small, and I am just making sure this is the right slide. What am I doing wrong here?
You got it.
There you go. Okay.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm the CEO and founder of Memory Well, and I'm actually going to tell you about sort of 2 companies today. One is Memory Well, which is originally how we got started, and then the other is PlanAllies, because during COVID we had to pivot away from Memory Well into what is now called PlanAllies. So at the end of the deck, you're going to see lots of slides about PlanAllies. In the beginning of the deck, you're going to hear a little bit about how we got started and our founding story, and the company that is Memory Well today and still does exist. It's just a smaller company than the one we originally intended to grow. So Memory Well really began with my experience caregiving for my father, and my background's in journalism. So I actually was 10 years at Time magazine, covering everything from the Obama White House to the Arab Spring. I was London bureau chief for a while. But I was also my dad's primary caregiver for the last 5 years of his life after my mother passed away in 2011. And you know, it was not easy. I have to say, it was probably one of the most searing experiences of my life. I'm an only child, and you know, I eventually had to move him into a community. I really wanted to be that person who could take care of him at home, but I look a lot like my mom, and my dad was going through a phase where he thought I was my mom for a long time, and they had a really great marriage, but he wanted to make out all the time, which was super awkward. And I had to eventually move him into a community, and when I did, they asked me to fill out this enormous 20-page questionnaire about his life, and I was sitting there struggling to write down the answers to these questions, thinking, A, I'm a professional writer, and even I can answer some of those questions well, like describe your parents' 40+ year marriage in 4 lines, which is like writing haiku. And especially for a magazine writer. And B, I didn't have a lot of faith that anyone on staff would read and remember 20 pages of handwritten data points for the 100 residents in the community at that time. And so instead I said, look, I'm a writer. I think it's just easier for me and easier for you if you let me write down his story. And I did. It was 1 page, single-sided, or just printed out, and I kind of plastered the community with it because I wanted them to get to know him. And he was already 12 years into diagnosis at this point. He couldn't really introduce himself that well anymore. He was actually diagnosed at the age of 58 when I was still a senior in college. And it really transformed his care. The staff remembered it. They told each other about it. 2 of his caregivers were Ethiopian, and they'd had no idea that my dad had actually lived in Ethiopia for more than 4 years early on in his career with the United Nations. And they became his champions. They would sit for hours and ask him what it was like to work with Emperor Haile Selassie and what the Empress was like. And Dad loved it because he remembered Africa still really well at that point from his early 20s, even if he didn't remember last week or last month or last year. So Memory Well basically began that way. We started writing life stories for my dad's friends and his community, and the community then hired us, and then we sort of expanded from there. It was a very organically grown business. I left my job at Time magazine in 2017. So my last assignment was covering the Hillary campaign. And then I was really glad to be done with politics. It was a good excuse to leave. And I ended up starting this company where we would write the life stories of seniors entering care. We would actually pull a lot of data out of those stories. We started using natural language processing on the stories to understand tone and intentionality better. And we were working on a lot of really cool projects, like doing research with UCSF, which is University of California, San Francisco. And the idea was that the stories not only would help better introduce them to their frontline caregivers, but it would help the communities better understand the trends that they had and the data that they had with their own members and their own patients, and potentially also medical implications, around Alzheimer's and dementia. So basically we had a network of over 1,000 writers across the country, and we were working, with about 30 companies and probably over 200 communities when COVID started. And then COVID hit, and this is like all the different use cases. When COVID hit, we really took it really took us for a loop. It's the front, like nursing homes and assisted livings were the front lines of the pandemic, and it was really hard to get into any of these communities for anything other than frontline, for like emergencies essentially. And even then it was really difficult, right? So it was hard to continue to do what we were doing, which was really terrible. And so we were like, what do we do? Is there a place for journalism in healthcare, and how do we fit? And I'm just going to skip through a lot of these things because these are just the different aspects of Memory Well, which, like I said, still exists. We actually are listed as a VBID benefit, which is for hospice, with a Medicare Advantage plan called Scan Plans in California. We're working with Optum at Home and in 3 different states with their palliative programs and hospice programs. So we still do some story work, but increasingly we are PlanAllies, which gets us to here. So as we sort of thought through, where does journalism fit in this space? We thought like, okay, first let's figure out where is there a disconnect, like we saw with seniors living in memory care, between like the patient and their providers or the payers in this case. And there's a lot of places, I think, where you can insert empathy into the healthcare system. I think it's something that essentially is lacked in a lot of places in the healthcare system. But where we landed was Medicare Advantage, because it's an intensely expensive problem in Medicare Advantage. If you are of Medicare age, or even if you're not, you probably have seen a ton of commercials on TV with like Joe Namath and Captain Kirk and like Tom Selleck selling you Medicare Advantage plans, and that there's 10 times more Medicare Advantage plans right now than there were 10 years ago, and that's because CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, has been driving a lot of money into that sector because they want people to age in place, right? And Medicare itself will not pay for aging in place. The Medicare Advantage plans is the way the government is incentivizing people to age in place because it's a lot cheaper than having people age in institutions. And that's why you've seen so many Medicare Advantage plans proliferate over the years. In Florida alone, there's 128 Medicare Advantage plans when you sign up. So it's a huge amount of plans, and there's a lot of competition for those retirees, for those folks looking to go into Medicare Advantage and sign up. And that has led to a lot of churn. So it's right now, it's on average about 10%. Some of the plans we're working with see over 40% churn. And that's a hugely expensive problem when every single member that they recruit is anywhere from $1,500 to $40,000 worth of income for them for that year. So by 2028, it's anticipated to be a $59 billion problem. So this is a very expensive problem for a lot of Medicare Advantage plans. And that's why we went there, because that's where the money is. We started working with Anthem, which is the third largest payer in the country, just talking to them about what their problems were in this space and what their needs were. And a lot of the plans have created this chief experience officer's office to help smooth out that process, to help retain members, to help figure out how they can better engage with their members. And so working with Anthem, they were like, well, we really love the idea of like changing how we call people, like how we call our members. And instead of a scripted call, which I think a lot of us have experienced, those really rote scripted calls where they call you up and say, please don't hang up, we're on a recorded line, I have a series of questions I have to ask you, it's totally miserable for everybody involved. Instead of doing those kinds of calls, what they wanted to do is still be able to collect that specific data, but have an open-ended conversation, a free-flowing conversation, one that's much more enjoyable for everybody involved. And as journalists, we're very good at interviewing people. We're very good at those open-ended, free-flowing conversations, but still collecting specific data out of those calls. So we created software which helps guide callers through a series of open-ended questions where we can gather specific data out of those questions, but have it be a much more enjoyable experience. And so we've really reimagined like the whole onboarding process. Usually the onboarding process is 3 calls where there's a welcome call. And we've really changed that welcome call to just being an open, ended, tell us about yourself, which is, I think, a really novel thing in healthcare. Tell us about who you are, tell us about your priorities, your values, tell us about your hurdles to those values and those priorities this year, and let's see if we can help. The idea being that if you can hook them into 2 new benefits within the first 30 days, they're 80% less likely to churn out of the plan. And the good thing is they already qualify for these benefits. They're just not using them, right? So the other thing we've really thought through is the health risk assessments and social determinants of health assessments that CMS requires to be collected from all of these new members. Now, these are generally, again, these really awful questionnaires. And so we've thought them through with the journalistic bent. And so, for example, on a social determinants of health questionnaire, instead of asking somebody, are you food insecure, which is a terrible question that no one knows how to answer, you would ask, the caller would instead see a teleprompted question from our software. Tell us about your favorite family recipes, or tell us about your holiday traditions, and what are your barriers to doing those this year, right? And so then the caller is seeing a series of multiple choice questions. Is this person food insecure in your opinion? Yes or no? If you hit yes, then it's a question. Is it a question of affordability, transportation, cooking knowledge? If you put affordability, a benefit might pop up. Do they know that they qualify for subsidized in-home food delivery? Are they interested in this benefit? Yes or no? So essentially, we've created a series of conversations that are designed to build trust with members, to build loyalty and engagement. We have a NPS score of 92. It also collects much better data, frankly, than the original data that you would have to do. And I've been really bad with changing these slides and keeping pace, I'm sorry. But I'm sure we can make these available at the end. So anyway, we essentially we're starting work with Anthem, and we're working with Scan Plans, which is, like I said, that really innovative plan out of California, which is actually just merged with Care Oregon, and they're starting a nationwide plan. As Paul said, I'm a little bit more, I guess, advanced than other folks who might pitch here, in the sense that we're already nationwide. We're working in, I think, 23 states. But have the potential to work anywhere because our writers are anywhere and the software can go anywhere. And we raised a venture round. So we raised a $2.5 million seed round about 2 years ago, led by Argonne Ventures, which is a deep tech fund out of Boston. Argonne is particularly interested in our data because we collect really clean data, which in healthcare is actually really rare. Most people in healthcare like try to collect data around you by like scraping publicly available data about you or buying commercialized data about you. We just do the novel thing of asking you. And so all of our data is first person, which is the cleanest data in healthcare. And at scale, we plan to use AI ML to begin to get predictive with that data. So starting to predict how likely is this person to turn out of a plan, or how isolated or depressed is this person. We already get an organic sense of that from the calls that we do. A quarter of people actually ask us to call them back. So you can get a sense of like, you know, how lonely they can be because of that. But adding into that layer of sort of natural language processing and then AI MLs to understand like and make it predictive, like when we can hear that timbre of their voice or certain intonations. We're actually working with a really cool, innovative natural language processing professor out of the University of Vermont who studies the pauses in between words, which is super powerful. And I think honestly more powerful than the actual intonations in a lot of ways, especially for seniors when you're thinking about how they pause when they talk and when they get to certain issues and certain things. And so, yeah, that's basically us in a nutshell. And I'm really excited to be here in New Mexico. Just really briefly, I came here from Washington, DC about 2 and a bit years ago. In DC, I live like 6 blocks from the White House, and 2020 was an intense year to live through. I will say, like, it was like living inside a protest. I got like tear gassed walking my dog, like my Whole Foods got like looted and my like CVS got looted 3 times. And I was like sick of the helicopters. So I, with 2 girlfriends, rented a place in Santa Fe between the November elections and inauguration, knowing it was going to get worse there. Really loved Santa Fe, ended up just sort of staying and met my now husband. We got married last year in May, and he lives in Albuquerque, so thanks. So I moved down to Albuquerque last summer, and I've been here ever since. So really love it here, and I'm excited to be in New Mexico, and I'm excited just to understand the entrepreneurial ecosystem here and meet you guys and hear what you're all doing, how I can be helpful to you. And if anyone, I guess, has any advice about like approaching healthcare systems here in Albuquerque or knows people who work for healthcare systems, that's always great to like grow the business here as well. So that's sort of my answer.
So thank you. We'll take questions in person and online. Please tell us your name and what group you're with, and you can line up over there and start asking questions. Don't be shy.
Hello. Fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
My name is Ava, and 8 years ago I wrote a book
Cool.
on elder abuse because of what I'd gone through with my father and taking care of him briefly as he suffered from Alzheimer's. And we know these neurological disorders are increasing. So your program, your presentation is so apt and so appropriate today. Okay. You mentioned a lot about the questionnaire. What I would like to know, do you have anything in your questionnaire that could maybe help people who are going through abusive or negligent situations?
That's hard to, in a lot of ways, because the companies that we work with have social workers who have very delicate toes that we never want to step on. And so we tend to not ask explicitly about trauma or abuse, but almost inevitably it comes up, right?
Exactly,
like, and so
yeah,
just asking somebody like about really basic questions, it inevitably like happens where we're like, tell us about some formative experiences in your childhood. And all of a sudden we're talking about like the tragic death of their brother. And we're like, wow, this is not where we thought this was gonna go.
Right.
And so, you know, it happens like it does come up and we do code for it. So there's like things called Z codes that we can push into
Excellent.
EHRs.
Yes.
And so when we see these issues, we flag them, and we have like a report that we send to the plans that we work with and the providers that we work with, which flags any specific issues or concerns that we have, where we're saying like, we think there might be an issue of elder abuse, or we think there might be an issue of, you know, falling, like she's reported falling a few times and she's really unstable, or things like that. Like there's just flags, which then the plan will follow up on.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And the name of my book is called eyes on the sparrows.
Oh, I'll write it down. I would love to read it. Thanks.
Come on up, Jack.
Okay. Hey, I'm Jeff. I work with Los Alamos National Labs. I have two questions. So the first one is, how do you ensure that you're accounting for bias from, and I'm assuming there's multiple individuals that are kind of entering in this data. And so to keep it clean, how are you kind of accounting for that bias? And then the second one is, what's your customer? When I hear a lot of companies say that they're going to use predictive, analytics using AI, how are you going to utilize that, and who are you appealing to?
Sure. So when you say accounting for bias, like in terms of entering the data, when we were talking about which sets of data here, we're talking about like the data, the multiple choice questions that people are answering.
Right, multiple choice questions that people are answering, or just how somebody's interpreting somebody's answer to a question, and then trying to fit it into something.
Totally. So generally, it's a great question and something that we have all honestly struggled with, because in terms of equity, you want to make sure that there isn't inherent bias put into the system before you're building it, right? Like, and making sure that the system is like, going to be able to produce reliable information at the end of it. We record all of our conversations, and we do check them. Like, so we'll listen to them and we'll look at the answers and to make sure that they sort of match up with what like other people are hearing. So there's a back check of everything that we do. We also have a rating system where like the person being called can rate the caller, and then the caller themselves can rate the person being called. So we can have an internal sort of feedback loops of like how they thought those calls went. If somebody thought the call went super poorly, then it's like obvious that we need to like go back in and figure that out. And so the rating system that we built, I think, is like actually yielded a lot more flags than we ever thought there would be. And so that's been a really great way for us to like come back and sort of fix things as it's happened. And so it's a very iterative process. No system is going to be perfect, right? Like, and so you just have to try to be aware of like, and we also try to match as much as we can callers with the people we're calling. So if we know and it's a specific language group or a specific age group or a specific kind of regional group, we always try to match those so that you're talking like for like, and they can better connect and understand each other. Rather than, early on in the story process, we had this really bad connection with somebody in like Maine with somebody in Alabama, and it was like a train wreck. And so like we try to make it as regional as possible, but obviously we're working with call centers. And so right now you're asking who buys us, like the payers are the ones who buy us. We're also starting to work with ACOs and providers, but the payers are our main client. So it's insurers, and we are working with their call centers to train their call centers to use our software. We have the capability with our 1,000 writers across the country to help them do calls in periods of surge, in periods of or with really specific needs. So we can do calls in 19 languages, for example. And so when there's specific cultural needs, we actually can come in and sort of hopefully better match when there's like a cultural need. So for example, we've been talking with Scan about helping them out with some of their Korean calls in LA because they've been struggling with some of those languages. But it is it's a challenge, and it's something that you have to just constantly be aware of and constantly work to fix, right? And so we're building an AI kind of, and I think a lot of companies are doing this, a kind of manifesto, but an AI sort of goal set that we want to try to always match to. And as we work through and build out our data sets and build out those graphs, that we always want to try to sort of get us to here are our goals, here are our values, and try to meet those values. But like I said, it's an imperfect process, and I'm never going to say we're going to get it totally right. I can only say we're going to do our best to make sure that we don't get it, or at least try not to get it totally wrong. In terms of our payers, our clients, and for the data sets, it's very much the payers as well. And I mean, for them, the number one thing that they want to figure out is how do we predict churn, right? And so understanding churn, understanding how to what are the sort of things that might flag it, and understand warning signs, and then be okay, this person's highly likely to churn. We're gonna call them 5 more times, or maybe visit their house, or do whatever, send them a gift basket. I have no idea what they might do. But just it's it makes them more aware, because it's such a bad problem for them that anything they can do to sort of reduce churn is the number one thing they want to do. The other data sets beyond that, we targeted isolation and depression in large part because we'd heard from our clients that it's a really hard data set to get at. You can live in a house with 10 people and still be really isolated, or you can live alone and still feel incredibly fulfilled and connected to the world. And so there isn't like a specific data set or flag that actually speaks exactly to that. And it isn't without talking to the person that you really wouldn't know if they're isolated or not. And so that's why our conversations are really indicative of that particular data set. And it's one that, again, the payers have said to us, we're super interested in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and one bit of advice or somebody that you should follow up with,
Yeah.
Fidelity EHR or social technology.
Okay.
I know that they're interested in having somebody buy their company, so I would follow up. And I have contact information. Can't tell them that.
Thanks. I don't know if we're in the market to buy anything right now, but like,
No, they're doing something similar.
Cool.
Maybe
yeah, I'd love to.
Jay, step over for me just a minute so that the audience can see you
Sorry.
talk. No worries. Alan, you have a couple of questions.
Yeah, my initial question is the memory well, is that still active?
It is. So we still do have a memory well side of the business. We anticipate about 80% of our revenue coming from the PlanAllies side of the business, but 20% will still come from memory well. And we, like I said, we're a VBID benefit for hospice with scan plans. We're also a palliative benefit with like Optum and Home, or really it's a Prospero Health, which is a division of Optum and Home. And we're working with folks like Capital Caring, which is the largest hospice in the Mid-Atlantic. So there's areas where the stories are still active. We just haven't, and we have sort of legacy clients like Maine General and AG Roads in Georgia from before COVID, but we just haven't been really working a ton with assisted living and skilled nursing right now because they remain so disrupted generally by COVID.
So when I was practicing law, one of my practice areas was representing victims of elder financial abuse. And it presents a number of challenges. Not all of them suffer from dementia, but particularly the folks who suffer from dementia. As an attorney, you can't take them on as a client because they lack capacity to make decisions. And almost invariably, they're brought in by a family member or a friend. And you cannot know initially whether that is really a family member or friend or the abuser. And so you have to sit down with the elder individually to try to get some sense of what the backstory is. And I mean, there may be one attorney in the country who's trained to do what you do, but I sure as hell wasn't. And I always felt that it was an incredible challenge to try to really get the story so that you knew what was going on. And it would seem to me that if you offered that service to attorneys who did that work, it could be an incredibly valuable service and really help get to the core of the story, because it's always very difficult to do.
That's a great idea. I've never thought about approaching it from a legal perspective, but yeah, we'd love to connect with you and maybe see if there's like a way to offer the stories that way.
Yeah, I'm retired now, so I'm no longer doing that. I'm now just an elder, but hopefully not suffering from dementia, but those cases were always the most difficult. The facts were always heartbreaking, and you always felt like you were struggling to really understand what was really going on, particularly with all the influences they have, even from well-meaning people, that distorts the story as well. So I'll put my contact in the chat, and if you wanna call and talk about just kicking some thoughts around, I'd be happy to do that.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ellen.
You're welcome.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Danielle with Conscious Crossroads End of Life Services. I'm an end of life coach and death doula.
Oh, cool.
Couple questions. So can we define churn?
So churn meaning like, when someone signs up for Medicare Advantage and then during open enrollment, so which is the first 3 months of each year, they can switch. And so they'll see like a commercial on TV and they'll be like, oh, I like Joni and Ed, and I'm gonna call that number. And then they call that number and it turns out they'll switch from that plan to the other plan. And sometimes they'll switch like 5 times and they won't even realize what they're doing, or they think they're just getting information, but they're actually switching plans. And then they'll end up with like a totally different plan. They don't understand really what their plan is.
Thank you. Okay, and so comment, really appreciate the business. The idea of inserting empathy and teaching people how to have conversations with seniors and with customers as opposed to just answering questions on a form. It's sad to me that this business is necessary, but I appreciate that someone is doing it.
Thank you.
Question is, are you saying scam or scan?
Scan, SCAN, scan
Okay.
plans.
Or is that only in California at this point?
Right now, it's only in California, but like I said, they just merged with Care Oregon, and they're starting a nationwide plan with Care Oregon in the next couple of years. So they're gonna expand, and I think it's called Health First or Health Right. That's what it's gonna be called, the nationwide plan.
I'm really interested in talking to you more about that and determining what you need to do to become eligible to be on said plans and things like that.
Yeah.
Because it's coming from a situation where it's like, we're not covered under hospice or palliative care or any of that. And it's very much inserting empathy and conversations and authentic communication stuff
Yeah.
into these relationships. So I would love to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I would say so CMS has been trying to, like I said, insert like a lot of more ingenuity into the hospice system. A lot more money is flowing into the hospice system. So right now, 23 plans nationwide offer VBID, which is hospice, like Medicare Advantage plans offering hospice, which is a very new thing. I think it's only a couple of years old. And they're opening up the supplemental benefits that are being offered by these hospices to better sort of sweeten and induce people to go into hospice earlier and earlier. Functionally, hospice ends up being about the last 2 to 4 weeks of life, but it should be the last 6 months of life. And we're just not a system, we're not a society sort of really prepared to, I mean, like Americans, it's like this feeling like we have to fight for every second, right? Like, and really we don't have enough conversations of, well, what is the quality of life in those last seconds or those last months? And certainly I've written about this for a time, but like I spent 2 years trying to like get my, sort of basically kill my dad. I mean, like he had dementia, he like lived well beyond the point in which he wanted to live anymore. He, couldn't speak, he was wearing a diaper, he didn't recognize anybody, he was just miserable. And like, but there's nothing you can do to sort of hasten that, right? Like just sort of, except I took him off of his flu shots and was like, maybe he'll get the flu, I didn't treat his cancer. And then they were like, he should have vegetables. And I was like, he doesn't like vegetables. Don't make him eat vegetables. And so he actually managed to live off of 11 Klondike bars, 6 Diet Cokes, and 2 bananas a day for 2 years, which was pretty impressive. But he did what he wanted to do. And that's what made him happy. And I was like, whatever makes him happy, let him do that. Right. But it's a really hard thing to talk about because it's a very controversial thing to say. I tried to kill my dad, but this was what he wanted, right? He didn't want to live this life anymore. And but there's no other way to sort of ease that process. And I think it's just a hard thing to accept, to live through, to talk about. So.
Well, I mean, and that opens up conversation about advanced care directives for things like dementia and medical aid in dying.
Yeah.
If you make those decisions and put those things on paper legally while you have capacity, maybe that opens up the door for things like we're talking about.
Well,
it's interesting.
Assisted death for dementia only exists in Belgium.
But that's what I'm saying is we don't have it in place at this point, but advanced directives ahead of time.
Yeah, it could help.
Exactly. But anyway, lots of conversations to be had. I will be reaching out.
Sure.
Thank you.
This conversation.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Troy. I'm a copywriter. I'm also a medieval studies PhD. So I do have a question, but I need to preface my question with a short story.
Sure.
So my dad had a heart attack last summer. And that kind of scared me, of course. And so he had to have heart surgery and all of that. And I realized that my parents have a lot of stories to tell. And so I bought them these workbooks of sorts. And I thought they were a cool idea where it's basically like they give you prompts and it says to, write out the answers to those prompts. So it's like, tell me your first experience doing this. Tell me what your childhood experience was for this. What was your first concert? Things like that. And I gave them to my parents and
They went nowhere.
well, they didn't go anywhere. And I think my mom was really offended for some reason. She's like, why, are you trying to kill us or something? Like, it's like, no, mom. And so I was trying to get to know them, but without just being like, okay, so tell me this about your life. It's like kind of a weird way of putting it. And my dad kind of had this very stoic attitude about it. It wasn't like, I'm offended. It wasn't like, oh, this is a great idea. It was just kind of like, oh, okay. And he kind of put it aside. I was like, what's next? So I guess my question is, I guess let me clarify, when you do call people to get their life story, they are mostly still alive, right?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. So when you're not doing seances or anything. So when you do call the folks, do you ever get pushback or any kind of like, I don't want to talk about this. This is weird. This is like, you're getting my life story because I'm going to die. Weirdness with them or offending them, or are they kind of too far gone to feel that way? Or
So
I don't know. I think it's a great idea, but
no, I totally get it.
coming from my parents' experience with it and seeing how they reacted to my little workbook things.
Yeah, no, I get it. And so I'll say a few things. One is that yes, like one of the big things of resistance when we first started was like this sense of like, I'm not dead yet. Like, why are you doing my obituary?
Right. That's just like, that was my mom.
Yeah,
That was my mom.
and like and we actually did a Kickstarter early on. We raised like I think $77,000 on Kickstarter selling life stories. And it was the one thing it taught us was we are never going to go direct to consumer because this is not a direct to consumer product. It's in the context of like, this will help your care. This will help caregivers get to know you. This is important for care. It becomes a different kind of conversation where the story is essential to that. I would say when you're trying to just be like, there's a whole book by Joe Coughlin called The Longevity Economy. And it's like all about how unsuccessful it is to sell to old people. Like it is like the worst marketing thing on the planet. Like, like there was Gerber found out there was all these like news stories about how old people with bad dentures were buying baby food. And so Gerber was like, great, we've got a new product line. They started producing all this like elder food, right? And nobody bought it because when you bought baby food, you could say, oh, this is for my grandchild. But if nobody wants to admit that they're so old, they have to buy like mushed food and buy elder food, quote unquote. And so all of the marketing to seniors is a very fraught thing. Like being old is just inherently in this society not cool, which I would argue with because I think being old is actually really cool. But there's in our society, for better or for worse, it's just tons of ages, right? And so anything that is sort of like considered old or end of life is just super hard to market and like very hard to successfully do. And there's also not a lot of channel partners that you can market through to older people like successfully. I've known a lot of companies that have like died on the mountain of AARP and never quite gotten there. So I would say that when it becomes something like that like is younger and cooler to do, when like everybody at TikTok is like, I want to tell my life story, then old people might do it. but it's hard. And part of the reason why we have like interviews when people are asking them questions is because getting them to do it, unless there's like somebody who's going to specifically sit down and ask you questions, is really, really hard. There was one company that started, it was such a millennial thing. I loved it. Like they like sent seniors selfie sticks so they could like put their phones like at the end of a selfie stick and answer a bunch of automated questions. And I was like, that's never gonna happen. Like never, ever. And like sure enough, they never happened and they had to pivot to something totally different. It's just not a generation that is used to talking about themselves and putting themselves out in like the way that millennials and Gen Zs are. And they don't, and like actually getting them to tell the story, I think they feel is an intimate process and they want,
I would get my parents to fill out the books.
So
I really want to know these stories.
So what I would say is one of the things that we did that was pretty successful during COVID, and we like during COVID, we were like, okay, what do we do? Like, how do we create resources for seniors who are essentially trapped in their own homes, right? And isolated from the rest of the world. And it was a huge problem. And so we started giving away, we built these timelines attached to our stories. And the timelines were free, and I think they're still free. I have to figure out how to do that, but we haven't done it in a while. But it was like, I think something like 4,000 people signed up for them. And they were free, and like you could, and it was just a software that we built where you could add things to your timeline, and you could invite people to collaborate to your timeline. And seniors loved it because it wasn't public. It wasn't like Facebook where they were adding all these things and everybody could see it. It was their own thing, and it was really just their own family, that whomever they wanted to invite to see it and collaborate on it. And so, and we would send out weekly questions, prompts. And we found that when they invited their grandkids, particularly to do this and collaborate, it like really got them to do it, because the grandkids were like, yeah, like I want to know what you're doing in World War II. Like, tell me about this. Come on, grandpa, like, let's do this, you know? And so it was a great way to sort of intergenerationally like kind of force them to do it.
Right.
So I guess like something along those lines, but you really need to be the person to sit down with them and be like, I want to know this story. I'm going to have a reporter here. We don't have to write it down, but let's just look at the questions, ask them, so I can at least keep them. So for my own like reference, I want to know, right?
My parents are in Ohio, so that's why I was like, hey, maybe you can fill out these workbooks and then, you know, have them there whenever you want to give them to me. I didn't say like when you die, you know, but
there's a lot of cultural things too. Like we found, you know, we were working with like Asian populations in San Francisco, and they were like so allergic to Big Brother and so suspicious. They were like, well, why do you want to know these things? You know, and like they were super like totally like not into it at all. And then there were like these super self-effacing immigrants in the Midwest who were just like, oh, it's never about me. I could never talk about myself. It's all about like others, you know, and trying to get them to tell their life stories was super difficult as well. So, I mean, there's just also cultural hurdles sometimes. But I mean, the thing that for us and why we chose to go the path of caregiving is because for caregiving, it's so important, and especially when your parents can't introduce themselves anymore, and they can't be the ones to say like, she likes the green Jello and like she hates the red Jello, and don't ever put the red socks on or she will go apoplectic, you know, like whatever it is, like that's really important to know for caregivers, and that's, you know, and so there has to be someone there to translate it, and that's why you need the stories. Sure.
Okay, last question. We need to wrap up because we have another person who needs to fill us in on some info.
Okay, cool.
Miriam Ortiz-Pino, More Than Organized. I'm fascinated by the jump from journalism to this, and I understand your story with your dad and everything, but is there something that was super surprising when you started connecting with the healthcare system that you had to navigate in a more business-oriented thing than journalism? Does that make sense?
No, it's interesting. So a couple things. I think one, you know, every single person in healthcare was like, we absolutely should do this. And every single person was like, what's the ROI? And I think I was like really taken aback by like this is such a necessity, and yet we can't do this unless you like find us a way to code this like for CMS basically. And so it was super to me like, okay, now we have to like figure out like the CMS coding system. We have to figure out like where we fit as a benefit. We have to figure out like, and then when we switched to PlanAllies, ironically, everybody was like, oh, totally get the ROI. Like, you know, it was like the opposite. It was like, you know, like it was very clear. There was like no question that was a really sound business model. I think I guess I was really taken aback by like, there was such I've been asked to speak a lot about empathy in healthcare and like putting the person into person-centered care. And it's something that people spend so much time paying lip service to in healthcare. And yet like so few people actually do anything about it. Yeah, like they actually just don't sort of like, it does not, it's never a priority. It's never something they do. And it just keeps like falling further and farther along the wayside. So that was one thing. Yeah, as a journalist, I thought that all of my creativity would come from my writing, and I was surprised at how creative the process of building a company can be, the process of iterating software can be. It's like a super creative process that I was like surprised by. And then I think the other thing is raising money is like kind of an interesting aspect of It feels a lot like source building to me, where like you're getting people to trust you, and you're getting people to believe that you are like gonna protect them and gonna like help them. But I will tell you, it is a lot easier to get people to part with their secrets than it is their money. So,
Yeah, no, I love this though, that you are so clear on the connections and how influences from outside fields can improve other areas of our lives. So, cool idea.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. All right.
So thanks for a obviously very engaging presentation, and it is my honor to ask New Mexico State question, red or green?
Oh, can I do both? I love green.
Christmas is what it's called.
Yes.
Terrific.
I love them both.
And then what can this community do for you?
Well, like I said, like, you know, if anyone has connections at health plans, we'd love to get connected to New Mexico health plans and or providers and work with them on PlanAllies. So that's always great to like grow the business here as well. And we're always recruiting writers. So if you go to memorywell.com, you can sign up as a writer there. And we use writers in New Mexico to do stories. In mostly California and Arizona. We're not doing any work here right now. But.
So thanks again. I think we can all agree the US healthcare system is a fixer-upper. Thank you.
Hey, Eric, we see you online. Hi, we miss you. So Jeff Hall, come on up with NMSBA and the LEAP program is gonna give us an update. And I think you have a new cohort starting, right?
Yeah,
Explain
we
what
just
that's
had
all
it come on. So yeah, hi everybody. Again, Jeff Hall. I represent the New Mexico Small Business Assistance Program. It's a joint venture between Los Alamos National Lab and Sandia National Laboratories, which is essentially, if you don't know about it already, I'm sure most of you already do, but you get $20,000 or $40,000 of lab assistance for free every single year. And yeah, it can be for anything, not just making bombs. So, you know, we've definitely done projects with AI, predictive learning, because we have a lot of AI specialists, artificial intelligence specialists that stop using acronyms. And then, yeah, so we do have a couple of other programs that I did want to highlight. If you want to know more about the NMSBA, I'll stick around a little bit afterwards, hand out some contact information, but you can always find us online, nmsbaprogram.org. Straightforward. And then, yeah, it takes like 5 minutes to apply, and I would call you or somebody else probably. But our LEAP program, which is the Lab Embedded Entrepreneur Program, is essentially where we take, you know, having this community sort of, what do you call it? The pressure cooker sort of energy, along with, you know, doing an accelerator program and I guess a studio. We sort of wrap it all up into this Lab Embedded Entrepreneurship Program, where we want to take a company who's developing a technology and help them get to funding, that minimum viable product, whatever they need to do that too. So, you know, we'll go through a series of having professionals come in and help them with their pitch deck, having them go out and do Energy I-Core, if you guys have ever heard of that, if that's applicable for their company. And it is focused on companies that are considered like high growth potential, so biotech, space companies, things like that. And that's if you have a technology and you really want to utilize, you know, the top of the world services at the labs, you get access to that and to the scientists to help you develop your technology. And you get $90,000 as a stipend to live there. The program, again, has various cohorts. It is competitive. And the cohort is open now for cohort 3. And all you have to do is go to nmleap.com, and the application is pretty straightforward there. And then there's one other program that I wanted to talk to you guys about. Let's say that there is a technology at the laboratory that you could see being incorporated into your business. And so if you can obtain a license with either national laboratory, you can then qualify for our Trigger Technology Readiness Gross Receipts program, or it's basically like a technology maturation program. where you can get awarded up to $150,000. And that's not awarded to the company, but again, awarded to a scientist to really take your technology and develop it through either a cooperative research and development agreement or a technology and maturation agreement. So I know I just spit out a bunch of information at you guys. And I think I made it in time. So if you have any other questions, again, my name's Jeff. I'll be over here. And very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we had at least one newbie here, but it looks like she snuck out. So Madison, is she left? Oh, okay. Anybody online new? I think those are all regulars too. All right. So I guess in the last 5 minutes, we can talk about events. Of course, we have the second, can you hand me the blue one? Jason Burnett Leadership Series. Jason, you want to come up and tell them what your second session is about? In case you forgot, it's here.
I think I remember. All right, so we had a great first workshop this last Thursday, a good turnout there. And so thank you for those of you that were here. This is an opportunity for us to just kind of do a dive into different leadership skills and develop as leaders. So whether you are a leader of a volunteer team in a nonprofit, or if you lead a team of employees or PTA or whatever it is, we're doing different skills to help build there. Each month kind of stands independently. And so this month we'll be looking at self-awareness and just the challenges of looking at ourselves and kind of holding up that mirror and how that impacts how we show up in our organizations. So self-awareness, it's the fourth Thursday of the month, 11:30, right here in these seats.
Yeah, your first session was great, Jeff, or Jason, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I don't think we have any other newbies. Jeff, with Activate, do you guys have any events, or Carrie, the city that you want to share? Go ahead.
Yep, we got for Activate coming up. We have on March 7th, we have a workshop. Barbara Dawson is teaching authentic communication for sales. It is free. It'll be hybrid. Thanks to the city of Albuquerque for sponsoring it, making it free for everyone. And then on March 9th, we have Startup Fiesta. So this is our second Startup Fiesta. We have a full slate. In fact, I think there's some folks in the audience that'll be pitching and showcasing. Paul, I need your logo. So we're, and once again, it'll be, this will also be free to attend. Thanks to the sponsorship from the city of Albuquerque. There'll be heavy appetizers and showcasing and pitches, micro pitches from our 16 local companies. If you want beer or wine, it'll be provided by Sidetrack, and those tickets you'll have to pay for, but otherwise it's free and open to the public, and I hope to see as many people as possible there. Last time it was at Stimulus Center and we sold out, we packed the place. So this time we went to a larger venue, and it'll be at Chatter on March 9th. And I put the link in our chat, activatenm.com/events to sign up. Thank you.
Jeff.
If I can just,
Sure, come on up.
Jeff, can I clarify something on that?
Sure.
So the two-part series is actually the 7th and the 14th. So it's a Tuesday followed by the 14th. And then on the 9th, everybody that's at the 7th is encouraged to go to the Startup Fiesta to practice what they learned in the first session, then come back on the 2nd, on the 14th, to say, okay, this is what happened, this is what I did, this is what I learned, this is where I blew it, or whatever. So thank you so much, Jeff. I'm looking forward to working with you.
Carrie, any events that the city needs to mention? She may have stepped away. Eric, you got anything you want to share with us? Guess that's a no.
You just unmuted.
Oh, hi, he's unmuted. Oh, wow. Come on up, Paul, and say goodbye to the.
Yes.
Oh,
So Jason has asked, who won the ski lift thing? And the most important question there is, had anyone taken me up on my bets last week, how would they have fared? So as you recall, I gave 3-to-1 odds on 2 companies. circular genomics, and RIA space activity. RIA space activity won. So at 3-to-1 odds, if somebody had taken the other side of those bets, I'd be ahead. So congratulations to RIA space activity. And I would say if you look at those companies, and especially RIA space activity, you'll see that there's a whole different class of companies competing in the ski lift pitch compared to even several years ago. So this is evidence that the startup scene in New Mexico is thriving. More serious out-of-state money is coming here. And I think we have a lot to look forward to in the next couple of years. But what we have to look forward to next week is Color Wheel Toys, an actual brick and mortar retail operation. And we'll be hearing all about the challenges associated with that. See you next week.
Everybody. Thank you. Thank you.